Pam Bondi was asked one simple question, and she crumbled. Instead of answering, she dodged, deflected, and spun wildly until the congressman reminded her her loyalty belongs to the Constitution, not the president.
Thank you, Attorney General Bondi, for appearing before us today. Madam Attorney General, I serve, in addition to the Appropriations Committee, as a ranking member of the Committee on House Administration. I sent you a letter last week along with my Republican counterpart, Chairman Brian Stile, requesting an increase in federal prosecutory resources to address threats against members of Congress, particularly in light of what happened last week in Minnesota, that tragedy. In 2024, the U.S. Capitol Police identified and received nearly 9,500 concerning statements or threats against members. Federal prosecutors have only secured 8 convictions so far, and the heightened threat environment demands an all-hands-on-deck approach. Will you commit to assigning an assistant U.S. attorney or a special assistant U.S. attorney in each of the 94 federal districts to, at least on a part-time basis, investigate and prosecute threats against members of Congress?
So thank you for bringing that up, and I take that very seriously. Not only what happened in Minnesota was horrible. I've spoken to Keith Ellison. I've spoken to Amy Klobuchar about that. It's horrible. We are involved in that. The FBI was involved. Our U.S. attorneys are involved. Many of these are district to district. So the way we're doing that is, I will tell you, my National Security Division is involved in all of those and assisting in those. We meet every single morning and we discuss that. But many of those, Minnesota, will be handled in the state in which it happened. Another one is Governor, I'm sorry if I can keep going. I'm sorry. I don't mean
quickly,
to
though.
Filibuster. Governor Shapiro and what happened in Pennsylvania with Governor Shapiro. I've spoken to Governor Shapiro. We are working hand in hand, our U.S. attorney with the district attorney there, hand in hand, just like in Minnesota. I made sure our U.S. attorney and our district attorneys there were working hand in hand. Political party doesn't matter when something like this happens. And I also want to make sure all members of Congress are safe as well.
Okay, and I would reiterate, Chairman Stile and I think Chairman Stile and I agree that at least a part-time in each of the 94 districts would be appropriate. Let me change topics for just a moment.
Really quick on that. Yes, we're doing that through our National Security Division, so I think that's already in the works, and I would be glad to meet with you in a secure facility to talk about that.
Very good. Thank you. Continuing, in addition to my role here, the committee that I serve on as an authorizer oversees Capitol security as well as federal elections, so I'm closely following the aftermath of January 6th. Recently, several defendants who received presidential pardons related to that day are now arguing in court that the pardon covers crimes like, for instance, illegal firearm possession discovered in a search of an individual's home in California months after January 6th. What's your position on whether the pardons cover these separate offenses?
The pardon power rests with the president, not the Department of Justice, and some of that is pending litigation, and I cannot discuss pending litigation.
Well, I'm not asking you about who has the right to a pardon. I think as the Department of Justice in February wrote, the pardon is an act of grace which removes the punishment from a crime a person has committed. It further said, in its effect, the granting of a pardon is in no sense the overturning of a judgment of conviction. It is an executive action that mitigates or sets aside punishment. So as the chief law enforcement officer, what's your opinion, not the president's power of whether he can offer a pardon? That's pretty clear in the Constitution. But for crimes committed unrelated to January 6th, would you suggest that the pardons would cover activities or crimes potentially committed outside of that by the same person?
Well, I don't know if you're referring to Joe Biden pardoning his son after he said he would not pardon Hunter Biden, or the
No, I actually
commutation
referred
of
to
all
January
the
6th. I'm sorry.
all the sentences that
Well,
the people that were on death row. I've met with those families.
No,
and all of those sentences were commuted. I'm not going to comment on pardons on either side of the aisle.
So, well, I'm not asking about either side. I'm asking, you're the chief law enforcement officer in the United States. You have a responsibility directly, you swore an oath to the Constitution, not the president. Want to know what your views are on the extent to which pardons cover potential crimes committed by individuals who have been pardoned but unrelated to January 6th.
Do you mean the ones that were done by the auto pen? I'm not going to discuss anything that
Mr.
could
Chairman,
be or not be pending litigation.
Respectfully, Ms. DeLauro accused you of filibustering. I think that's the height of filibustering. This is a serious topic, and for you to suggest that you don't have an opinion or to divert to other things that had nothing to do with January 6 pardons, I think is frankly demeaning to your responsibilities and your job. With that,
What makes this exchange stand out isn't just the tension in the room. It's the collision between responsibility and avoidance. The kind of moment that tells you far more about an institution than any prepared statement ever could. The congressman enters with a serious, direct, and absolutely legitimate concern: the rising number of threats against members of Congress and the stunning lack of federal resources dedicated to prosecuting those threats. He is not playing politics. He is not setting a trap. He is asking a basic question about public safety and the Justice Department's commitment to enforcing the law in a climate where threats are climbing, prosecutions are rare, and accountability is almost non-existent. His question should have received clarity. Instead, it received evasion. Pam Bondi begins her response with all the familiar signals: empathy for the victims, acknowledgement of coordination, and vague assurances that the department is involved. But even in those early moments, you can hear the hedge. She talks, but she doesn't answer. She offers sentiment, not substance. She circles the issue instead of facing it directly. And then, when the congressman presses for the structural fix he's actually asking for, the core issue she's avoiding, her footing starts to slip. But it's the shift to January 6th that exposes the real problem. This is where her evasiveness stops being subtle and becomes undeniable. The congressman poses one of the clearest, most straightforward legal questions any attorney general should be expected to answer. Do January 6th pardons apply to completely separate crimes committed long after the events of that day? This isn't about politics. This isn't about specific defendants. This isn't about ongoing litigation. It's about the outer boundaries of executive power. It's about whether a president can effectively grant someone a blanket immunity card for any future wrongdoing. It is the kind of constitutional clarity the nation deserves, and the kind an attorney general should articulate without hesitation. But Bondi refuses. Not because the question is too complex. Not because the DOJ doesn't have a position. She refuses because answering truthfully collides with the political incentives she's trying to protect. Instead, she hides behind the shield of pending litigation, even though the congressman is explicitly asking about general legal principle, not about any active case. When he clarifies that, when he gives her a clean chance to answer, she doesn't step toward clarity, she runs away from it. Suddenly, her answer veers into unrelated topics: Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, presidential commutations, anything to drag the conversation somewhere safer, somewhere farther from the constitutional problem sitting right in front of her. It's not just avoidance, it's deflection wrapped in misdirection, and the congressman sees it instantly. That's why his tone shifts. He reminds her firmly and publicly that her oath is not to the president who appointed her. It is to the Constitution. He reminds her that her responsibility isn't to dance around uncomfortable truths or to build rhetorical escape hatches, but to clarify the law for the American people. In that moment, his frustration becomes something deeper than political disagreement. It becomes a warning, a reminder that the Attorney General of the United States cannot treat accountability as optional or constitutional clarity as a partisan inconvenience. What this exchange reveals is a broader truth about institutional leadership. Neutrality isn't silence. Neutrality isn't avoidance. Neutrality isn't pretending you don't understand a question. True neutrality is the ability to answer a legal question without turning it into a political shield. True neutrality is the confidence to speak plainly about the limits of executive power. True neutrality is understanding that the Justice Department's credibility relies on its willingness to confront hard questions, not bury them. Bondi's refusal to engage, her filibuster of tangents, distractions, and unrelated references reveals a deeper drift. When leaders avoid uncomfortable truths, institutions begin to slide away from accountability. When the Attorney General will not say what the law clearly says, the public loses trust in whether the law still applies equally to everyone. And that is why this moment matters. Because accountability is not optional, especially when we're talking about presidential power. The public deserves to know whether a pardon is a get-out-of-jail-free card. They deserve to know what limits exist. They deserve transparency from the people sworn to uphold the Constitution. And when the Attorney General won't answer, it becomes even more important that elected officials keep asking, that hearings keep pressing, that the public keeps demanding. In a democracy, silence is not neutrality. Silence is surrender. And that's exactly why moments like this one matter.